we've tested the submarine rigorously. We've had multiple crews of people try this thing, and nobody has mastered the submarine yet. It is the skill ceiling on this is astronomical, but it is so fun once you get the hang of it. So you're going to be able to physically go underneath the water. You can be driving on the surface and then descend. They cannot be once underwater. They cannot be detected by conventional intel. So this is a good way to like sneak into enemy logistical supply lines and then possibly snipe off some freighters or soft infrastructure. There's a whole sonar system. Okay, so the sonar it sends you can swap between two modes. One is it's a directional mode where it pings far out, even farther than your camera can see, and it will return information to you, rough information to you about what's out there. It might give you a signal strength and a general idea of what you're going to see. The submarine can follow those signal strengths until you get closer. You might see the enemy ship, and if you ping the ship within your camera range, you'll see ghosts of the ship. You'll see almost like echoes of where it might have been. Or what you might be seeing, and from that you're going to have to infer like where you're going to fire your torpedo, at what depth you're going to want to hit it at. One thing to be careful of is that sonar will also give away your position to other enemy sonars. So if you are pinging for enemy ships, make sure that you are just be aware that you're advertising your position to them for them. There's a battery system, there's torpedoes, there's periscopes.
The ship's torpedo bay holds 8 Warden-exclusive Moray torpedoes that can be fired 2 at a time out the front of the ship. And as the gunner, you can set both the distance and depth for it to fire, so if it doesn't hit anything along the way, it will just explode at the set distance and depth that you set it at.
The basic construction of a submarine consists of the pressure hull, the tanks which are built around the pressure hull, and the superstructure. The pressure hull, which includes the conning tower, is the principal part. This hull must be watertight and airtight and able to resist the water pressure when submerged. The hull is circular for maximum strength and is reinforced by steel frames over its entire length. Fitted around the pressure hull are the tanks. There are ballast tanks, which control the buoyancy of the boat, and fuel tanks. The main ballast tanks are completely flooded when the boat is submerged. This is a cross-section. The tanks have flood ports open to the sea. The main vent valves control the escape of air when flooding the tanks. These are emergency vent valves. In order for the submarine to submerge, both sets of vents must be open to flood the tanks. In order to surface, air under pressure is admitted to blow the water from the tanks. High pressure air at first, followed by low pressure air.
So, when I said that you're going to descend from the surface to underwater, there is a physical Z plane, Z-axis. So you can go up and you can maneuver up and down on any axis that you want. Attacking submarines is going to be highly relevant. In order to control the submarine, there are 3 main ballasts. And I'm going to give you guys a loose primer about this, but I'm not going to get into too much
crash
detail.
course.
Yeah, I'm taking notes.
There are 3 ballasts. There's one at the front of the ship, one in the midship, and one at the back. If you press Q, you can mount it, and if you press A and D, it will be flooding it. What these are like air tanks. Try to imagine them like the air tanks on a submarine. When they fill with air, the ship will rise. When they fill with water, the ship will sink. The one at the rear is called the safety ballast. You probably don't need to touch that. The ones that are most important is the one in the middle. It's the main ballast. If it is totally flooded, if you guys are in there now, feel free to flood it. Go flood it all the way to 100%. What you'll notice is the ship will sink down to neutral buoyancy, which means that it's not going to go up or down. It's just going to sit in the water at a certain depth. If you want to keep the one at the front blown, keep that fully empty, so at 0%.
Oh.
The driver on the left hand of the driver's seat will control which direction, left, right, or left, straight, and forward, and will control the rudder. Okay, so the main ballast is like on a regular submarine. Flooding the main ballast will put the submarine into a neutral buoyancy. If you are on the surface of the water, flooding it will put the ship slightly below the surface of the water, and it will sit at one depth without moving. Flooding the negative ballast is a ballast that's at the front of the ship that will cause the ship to pitch down and will dive the sub in a crash dive. So this is going to make you go down really fast. The safety ballast exists because if the sub starts to take on water, for example, if you get hit by a sea mine or other content, which we haven't discussed yet, your ship is going to start to weigh more because a ship full of water weighs more. The safety ballast is there to offset the water that might be inside your ship. So if you start to take damage, it's going to take somebody's complete attention to try to keep the ship balanced in the water without surfacing. And of course, there's a crush depth. If the ship goes too low in the water, you're going to start to take damage. So you're going to want to try your best to keep flat. The dive officer is probably the most important for controlling your depth. And the right side is the dive officer. This guy controls the depth, the fine tuning of depth. So if you want to go up or down, the dive officer will change the planes, which is like, think of them like flat fins on either side of your ship. You'll be angling the fins up or down. So if the ship is moving forward, the fins are angled up, then the ship will start to dive, will start to go lower. And as soon as you stop accelerating, you'll notice that the ship doesn't go up or down. It doesn't like return to the surface. So again, if you are at neutral buoyancy, those should be the only 3 seats you need in order to go up and down.
Okay.
In most cases, you won't need to use the negative or the safety ballast unless you're trying to maneuver really hard for whatever reason. All you should need to do to control the submarine is to flood the main ballast and have the dive officer control the fins on the side of the ship. Think of them like flat fins, and the dive officer pitches them up or pitches them down to fine tune the depth of the ship. So I'll leave it at that. As I said, you guys are going to want to try this, and you're going to lose. You're probably going to take a lot of damage before you finally master it. But I promise that once you do get the hang of it, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's super cool.
And how about the battery system?
So the battery system is used for keeping the ship. The ship has to manage its underwater time with its above water time, so you can't just stay underwater all the time. Certain functions on the ship will consume battery, like blowing your ballasts will take battery, as well as pinging with your sonar, and just staying underwater will consume oxygen and use up the battery. To recharge this battery, you have to surface the sub and sit idle. The assumption here is that your engine is no longer powering the ship's propellers; it's being used to power the battery system. So if you want to operate in enemy waters, you're going to have to be very careful about where you expose yourself.
One thing that was really cool during testing that I experienced, Max, is just having to rely on the player who's at the periscope and also at the sonar station. Like, you sort of feel like you can't see much unless you're there, and you're sort of have to heavily rely on your voice comms, which I thought was really cool.